Hello everyone, it's Micah. And on today's Bakeaway, we're after a little bit of a recording break, unintentional recording break, we're going to come back with bake number 7, which was a traumatic one for me. It was a double crusted lattice apple pie. And in retrospect, this was sort of like going to a gymnastics training or workout for the first time and trying to do some sort of ridiculous Simone Biles type of multiple flip vault or floor exercise in your first day training to be a gymnast. That's sort of what this was like, and so I was way out of my depth. And so you will see me in all of my disarray and all of my chaos and all of the ways that we always fear when we go into the kitchen that we're going to be after being relatively in control of matters, even with the incident where I spilled cocoa powder all over the kitchen. This time I really did kind of lose control of the narrative, and the pie was not successful, but I will walk you through all of that. Before I do that, though, I'd like to report the encouraging progress and metrics on my channel, he said facetiously. I have now recorded 9 videos, and across those 9 videos, I have 20 views. Thank you very much. Yes, an average of about 2 views per video. Now, I didn't get into this to get views, but I kind of thought the algorithms I thought enough people would be interested in baking in general that would be going through these videos that I would get something. But thank you to Anna and Gaines for being there in the comments and probably making up about 19 of those 20 views. And I think maybe I'm the 20th is when I went in to click to view the video, to make, not to boost my numbers, but to make sure that it kind of looked online the way I wanted it to. So thanks to my 2 subscribers. But yeah, like I said, this is for me. This is me documenting my journey, and so and it keeps me accountable, because of what I've noticed is when I've not been recording videos, I've also kind of fallen off of my cadence of baking. So as long as I do the videos, that sort of holds me to task on these bakes. And the month of February has pretty much gotten away from me. It's been a blur. February is a short month anyway. You'd think when it's only 3 days shorter that, it wouldn't really make that much of a difference, but it just seems to, for some reason, fly by very quickly. I guess my workload on my regular job, because obviously I'm not baking as a professional, paying the bills type of thing, and of course need to pay the bills first so I can afford the flour and the sugar and the butter. So anyway, a little bit of a diversion there, but what I realized when I got back in the studio, so to speak, here to record was that I thought I was only a couple of bakes behind, but it turns out right around the end of January and the beginning of February, I binged a bit and did several bakes, and so I'm a lot further behind than I thought I was in recording my exploits in the kitchen. So we're gonna get started with the disastrous apple pie that I made. I'm excited to show you what a mess I made of this. So everything looks good to start off with. The first thing, and the most infamous aspect of pie making in general, is the pie crust. Notoriously difficult to do. This was my very first pie crust. If you don't, other than I think I've made a cheesecake and did a graham cracker crust or a chocolate cookie crust or something like that. Nothing like making a real flaky pie crust. It's so difficult to do. And I've since done another bake to try it. So I've now done 2 batches of pie crust. Still don't have it down yet. I think maybe I'll get it the 3rd time around. So excuse me, there's another pie in my future. Anyway, here's my setup for making the pie crust. The chilled butter, ice water, flour, salt, baking soda. No, actually, I think it's salt and I think that's sugar in the very front there. And then I've have gotten smart enough as part of my organization to just keep a small container of dusting flour, just so I'm not digging into the flour all the time to have flour to go in, and I'm not gonna like I could see myself inadvertently or like not really thinking and reaching in with my hand to the flour and not being very sanitary. So I do need some, dusting flour on the side. So, and I've since replaced that ripped in half Post-it note with an actual kitchen label. So we're making progress on all fronts in terms of being super organized. The food may be terrible, but everything is organized. And this is me cutting in the butter, which I had some practice doing from the 2 batches of biscuits that I had done. In fact, I went into this feeling pretty confident because the way they teach you is like, oh, making a pie crust is very much like making biscuits. No, biscuits are very forgiving. Pie crust, I've found out, is not forgiving. So cutting in the butter. And then the tricky part here is, okay, well, at this point, I think we've finished cutting in the butter, and perhaps I can see right now in this picture that the pieces of butter some of them are larger than pea size, so maybe I wasn't really all the way there. I needed to mix it some more, cut in the butter some more. It's quite a workout, and I really do wish I had invested in a OXO pastry cutter, not a plug, not a paid plug or anything, or something that had some because if you look at this pastry cutter, where we go. If you look at this pastry cutter, you can see those edges are they're not sharp per se, but they are unforgiving, and so it does hurt a little bit to try to cut in very hard chilled butter, which you have to use in order for the butter to not just melt. And so anyway, it was not overly fun. I mean, the idea, the motion of cutting in the butter, for someone who's not handy, it's kind of a fun exercise, but it does hurt a little bit when you use one of these that's just metal. Need some padding there. Anyway, mixed in, and then okay, so the tricky part about taking pictures of this as opposed to having a camera set up recording. And side note, I have been contemplating ways to set up a camera so that I could just record myself doing this and maybe make it a little more engaging than me going back after the fact. But me trying to hold a phone while I'm working with dough is pretty it's pretty challenging. So the step that you're not seeing here is where I put in the water 1 tablespoon at a time. Now, this is from the book that I've been working from, Sally McKinney's book, and she's like, I've read some other pie crust recipes where they basically say dump in 1/4 cup of water, or maybe even more, mix it in, and then do the other 1/4 cup of water. But she's like, use the water sparingly, only put in 1 tablespoon at a time, because you just want enough water in the dough for it to come together into a solid mass of dough. And that's subjective. That's not something that you can really, and that's what I have to get a feel for. What I feel like happened both on this pie crust and, spoiler alert, on the next pie crust I did for Valentine's Day, because she was so conservative with the water, because she said do not add any more water than you have to, I think I did not add enough water. And this is where writing a recipe is such an art, in addition to being the science of getting the steps right so that the ingredients meld in the proper way. For the subjective parts of the recipe, you have to be careful how you word things. If you caution your beginner baker to be almost frightened of adding too much water, you're probably going to end up erring on the other side of it, which is it's not going to hold together. Now, and what I can see right now very clearly is that this dough is dry and crumbly. It needed more water. But while I was mixing it together, it did sort of start coming together. And so to me, that's where I said, okay, well, I need to stop, because that's what she said. Don't add any more water than you need for it to start to come together. The idea is like that once you turn the dough out and form it, and roll it out, it's going to start cohering a lot better than it looks like it will in the bowl. And I've seen that on multiple baking instructional videos where they say, it's going to deceive you, like it is not going to look cohesive, but once you start rolling it out, it's going to be fine. But I think I was way under on the water. But anyways, you can see here I've got my apples, and I used a very sour variety, Granny Smith, I believe, and I used a very sweet variety. And I can't remember the name of it was I think it's Fuji, I believe. It's like the sweetest possible apple that there is. And I know nothing about apples. I do not eat apples. I don't particularly like apples, but it's the iconic apple pie. I just thought I would swing for the fences with this one. Probably should have just used apple pie filling so I could like focus more on the crust, but I said let me just go all in and see, because all of my other bakes have been pretty successful, and so I was feeling kind of cocky at this point. And yeah, I was brought low by this recipe. So you can see I've dusted my workspace, and I've got all my apples, and I've got my ice water at the ready, so like while I'm forming the dough I can add more water to get it to cohere a little better. And so this is my dough. I've pulled it together, and it doesn't look bad to me. I mean, I see really huge chunks of butter, but to me that just means more rise. I've been taught through these various books and videos that seeing butter is actually a good thing. It doesn't mean that you haven't mixed it enough. I don't know, but you can still see the crumbles all around the side. So I feel like, and you can still, I don't know what you can see, because again, I'm looking at the full picture, and I don't know if I've got it blown up enough, but I'll try inserting the pick as well. But there's some crumbliness going on too. And so then, because this is a double pie crust recipe, I then split it in half with my bench scraper, and then formed the two discs that I'm going to chill and then later roll out. So to me, at this point, I don't have any real inkling that anything is wrong. The discs look fairly cohesive. It doesn't look like, I'm having a little bit of trouble with them, but I also thought, well, chilling them for 2 hours will help everything settle down and cohere. In the past, when I've had baking issues, when I've had consistency issues during the bake or the mixing process, usually everything kind of comes out in the wash, so to speak, or more to the point in the oven. But anyway, so yeah, nothing looks too terribly off here. So then that, I don't know why I feel so compelled to always show you what a mess I've made. But yes, this was after I had put the discs of dough in the refrigerator to chill. And there they are in the refrigerator to chill. And this is, because this video was taken on January 31st, this was when we had 2 weekends of snow in a row. And this was the snow flurries that was happening outside my window as I was making this pie. You can't really see it because the snow is very, very tiny, but it was actually flurrying pretty furiously, if you'll forgive my pun. Yeah, and this is me continuing to try to do that. So here are my apples. That's a very bad picture of the apples. And so I watched a YouTube video. Yes, I don't know anything about apples. I watched a YouTube video about the best way to slice apples, and I found one that made it seem really, really simple. It's basically like how I would cut a green pepper, where you kind of like, you really just lop off one side so that you have a flat surface, and then you lop off another side, and you just do it in four big cuts, so that you're working with a flat item that is stable on your cutting board, and so that you're cutting around the core instead of going in and purposely digging in and pulling out a core, which can be challenging. And I don't have an apple core or anything like that. The other thing is that I some time ago, I read an article, or it was part of an article that preached this sort of idea that the apple core is a myth. There's really no such thing. There's really just a couple of seeds in the middle, and then the stem comes out of the top. But the apple is pretty much the same thing all the way through, with almost nothing that you have to like eat around in the middle. So I was also kind of taking that tack with it. The thing is, I got so caught up in my YouTube video that I was 3/4 of the way through cutting these 12 apples when I realized that I hadn't peeled them. I freaked out for 2 seconds, and then I said, you know what? If they have to be peeled, they have to be peeled. So whatever I need to do. And so this is when I started peeling. And as you can see, I'm not very good at peeling apples either. But this was when I started peeling. This was really, I only was able to do this with like the last 2 or 3 apples. I had already sliced all of the other apples. So I had to go in and cut off the peels from each individual slice of apple that I was working with. And as you can see, by the time I got around to doing that, the apples had already started to turn to oxidize and turn a little bit brown, because it basically took me 45 minutes or an hour. It would have taken less time if I had remembered to peel them, but I had not. And I can see that the peels are still on at this point. So I think the ones in the bowl on the left were the ones I had that I did before, that I did after I realized that I needed to peel the apples. So the left are the peeled and the right are the unpeeled. So I had to go in and pull those out and peel each slice individually. I briefly thought about just cooking it with the peel on, but from what I could tell, that's not a preferred way of doing things, and I'm not going to sabotage my pie after going through so much trouble to make it. So this is this is the stack of peels as I was cutting them, and you can see the bowl on the right is almost empty. So at this point, I'm almost done, and there's lemon in the recipe, but I decided to prematurely add the lemon to the apple slices before it says to do it in the recipe, to keep them from browning any further, from oxidizing any further. So as you can see, I was almost there when I took this picture. Just those last few left in that bowl on the right before I would be done. But I think I did this mainly to show how many little segments of peel I had to cut off of these apples. It was terrible. So finally, and I thought this was going to be the easy part of my recipe. This is making an apple pie filling is more like cooking than it is baking. So here are all my ingredients for the apple pie filling: the apples, of course, the sugar, is that egg? I don't remember there being egg. It's been 3 weeks at this point, over 3 weeks since I did this, so I am forgetting some of the ingredients. That's definitely cinnamon in the middle, and the little silver ramekin, and then there's some flour, and then the lemon that I had already added ahead of time. I really don't remember there being egg, but I guess that there was. I don't know. I'm gonna have to go into the recipe and see what that was. There'll be a caption on the screen to show you what it was for real. And then the very optimistic pan that I was going to cook that in, and you can see right now there's more apples. The volume of the apples is greater than the pan, and so at some point I had a reality check and switched these out to my Dutch oven. In the meantime, and I forget exactly the sequence here, I guess maybe I rolled out the dough while I was cooking the apples, but at any rate, this is 2 hours of 2 to 3 hours later after I had thoroughly chilled the pie dough. And so I had floured my counter again and was getting ready to work with the dough. And so this was my first little attempt at rolling out the dough. Is obviously not big enough yet. There's lots of cracks. Looking back at it, it does not look that bad. It looks kind of okay. And this is where I kind of ended up with it. I'm not skilled enough at this point to do a perfectly round pie crust. I felt like this was reasonably close to round, and I thought it would have to do, because the thing is, you have a limited amount of time before the dough starts getting really tacky and your butter gets too soft, and then it, like, when you bake it, it's not going to be optimal because the butter is going to seep out. I had the same thing happen with the biscuits. And so I worked with what I had, and I put the pie dough in the pan. It was a small victory that the dough didn't break in any way. Like, I followed the usual roll the dough over the rolling pin and then roll it back out into the pan. That worked out pretty okay. But obviously, like, you want to have significant overhang so that you have the sufficient coverage, because pie crust will shrink back down into the tin. And so I think I popped that back in the fridge at that point, and then I started mixing all of my ingredients together in preparation for cooking them. And then here's the Dutch oven with all of the apples and all of the other ingredients, the sugar and the cinnamon and the flour. And so now here we have our second pie crust, because not only was I challenging myself to do an apple pie, I was challenging myself to do a double crusted lattice apple pie, way above my skill level. So here's the second ball of dough. As you can see, that one's more round. That one actually looks pretty decent. Looks better in retrospect than I thought I was doing at the time. But here is my attempt to cut the strips, because at this point I was panicking that the dough was getting too tacky, that the butter was starting to melt. So I said, by the time I try to be super precise and measure these strips out to the exact width, like, I'm going to lose valuable time and my dough is going to be too soft. And so I tried to eyeball it. I thought, I got this. I've used pizza cutters many times to make very even slices of pizza. How much different could this be? Well, you can see right there how much different it can be. These strips were highly irregular. And there's my lattice. Again, as I was doing this, so the thing is, I feel like this recipe is lacking, and I don't mean to throw Sally under the bus or anything, but I still don't understand how you're supposed to weave a lattice of dough that you've just rolled out over warm apples. I also similarly don't understand how I'm supposed to be working with a bottom crust that's unbaked and putting warm apples on top of that, and how that's supposed to keep the crust from becoming soggy. I'm pretty sure next time I try something like this, I'm going to par bake the crust, regardless of what the recipe says. I'm convinced that all of the extra handling of the dough and the exposure of the dough to the warm apples was what made this bake part of what made this bake not go well. Now, the other thing you may notice is that the apples are pretty thickly cut. This is per the recipe. She specifically said that she likes 1/4 inch thick apple slices, because that helps them keep their integrity, their structural integrity, that a nice crunch remains when you cut them. If you cut them too thin, they'll just be mushy. So I also will not be following that advice anymore if I make another apple pie. So, but I guess though, for for a first try, this isn't so bad. I had to make a lot of compromises because I was doing the lattice in real time over the top of the cake. That's what the recipe or the instruction in the book was to do. Now I've since seen another instructional video where they show you how to do the lattice off to the side on the counter, and then you just pull the entire lattice up and then drape it over the cake. I doubt that I would have been able to do that, but I think it would have possibly worked out better here, because as I was pulling the strips of dough back, that meant I was handling them, and then I was pulling them back over. When I was pulling them back, there was apple pie filling on them, and so they were already getting soft and mushy and losing their shape as I was doing this. There's nothing in the recipe. Well, I have to go back and double check, but I don't think there's anything in the recipe that tells you how to correct for that. I was just winging it. I was like, I got to do this as quickly as possible. At a certain point, I'm like, it'll look better once I get it out of the oven. So that was that. And then this is after the egg wash went on. That's what the egg was for. Yeah, okay. So I was wondering what the egg was for. That was for the egg wash. Yes, of course. And this was my massively disrupted kitchen. Again, look what a mess I made. So this is the pie in the oven, and one part of the recipe that was noteworthy, and you can see here, is that they said put a baking sheet underneath the pie so that you catch any drippings. I don't know that this was a good idea. I think part of what happened was that it blocked heat from the bottom of the pie, which sorely needed direct heat, because the pie crust was struggling against the apple pie filling to not be soggy, to get fully baked. And it just appeared to me, and this is all hindsight for sure, but and who knows, Sally obviously tested this recipe. She said she's been developing it for years, so she's figured out a way around this. I don't know, but every oven is different. The equipment you use, the pie tin, all kinds of things can come into play. But I feel like putting this baking sheet really hindered the bottom crust from baking. Now, when I pulled it out, I was kind of excited. The top crust looks really, really nicely browned. It looks extremely rustic, but it doesn't look terrible. I actually posted it on Facebook because I was a little hyped that I had made myself an apple pie. And at another angle. So yeah, it looked good. But then I cut into it, and yeah, so you can see there's no structural integrity. All the apples just went tumbling into the empty space created when I tried to cut out a slice of pie. You can probably tell that the apples were not as cooked through as they needed to be to make a really sort of yummy pastry experience. The apples were very crunchy, and the flavors, the cinnamon and the sugar didn't permeate the apples. There was still very much a lot of what I would call raw apple flavor in there, which isn't terrible, but it's not not what I wanted in an apple pie. And the bottom crust was just non-existent. It was just mush. It was just mush. So the top crust was tasty. It was nice and flaky. The bottom crust was terrible. So that was my apple pie disaster. But you learn the most from these things. I took away more notes from this bake than any bake I had done so far. The other bakes more or less just confirmed what I thought I already knew about baking. This one, I think, taught me a few new things. So the apple pie was no good. I think most of it ended up in the trash, unfortunately. But I did learn something. And one of the things I think I've learned is that I may just use apple pie filling the next time around. Until I'm sure that I know how to do the crust and work with the crust, I'm maybe not going to spend so much time working with the raw ingredients. Or I'll just do berries. Berries are already in a bite-sized format. You don't have to do so much work to get them down to that texture, consistency, and size that you want for the baked good that you're making. This was a lot of work and didn't pay off in terms of flavor, but you live and you learn, you bake and you learn. And so, you know what? I think I inadvertently came away with my bake away before I announced it. So that was it, in case you missed it. And before this video gets any longer, I'm going to conclude and we'll move on to the next bake.